Some people move to the lake to get away from it all. I moved to the lake to rebuild myself. After losing my wife to cancer and stepping back from my career as a civil engineer, I bought a rundown cabin on 12 acres of lakefront land up in Pinewood Ridge, a sleepy town in the Pacific Northwest. The lake was quiet. The trees were tall. And the birds didn't care about who I used to be or what I'd lost. It was peace, finally. The first breath of it in years. The cabin needed work, okay, a lot of work, but that's exactly why I bought it. Fixing things is my therapy. So when I pulled up with my U-Haul full of tools, boxes, and hand-me-down furniture, I had no idea I was about to step into a full-on war with the local HOA. I was barely halfway through unloading when I heard it, the unmistakable clip-clop of judgmental footsteps on gravel. "Excuse me," a voice barked from behind my truck. "What do you think you're doing?" I turned and saw her, mid-50s, Botoxed into permanent disapproval, gripping a leather binder like it was a Bible, and she was about to deliver Old Testament wrath. Her name, I would soon learn, was Loretta Halberd, president of the Pinewood Lakes HOA. But that day, she didn't bother with introductions. "You can't just move in here," she snapped, glaring at the U-Haul. "This property is private lakefront. HOA managed. You're violating community move-in policies and obstructing emergency access." I blinked. "I own this place." She narrowed her eyes like I'd confessed to a felony. "Impossible. This cabin's been vacant for over 10 years. We've been maintaining the shoreline ourselves." I handed her the deed, freshly signed and notarized. I'd bought it from the estate of the original owners, a sweet couple who'd owned the land since the 70s. Turns out, the HOA had been assuming the place was abandoned because the owners lived out of state and hadn't visited in years. Loretta skimmed the deed, her lips thinning as the realization sank in. "You should have notified the HOA before moving in. There are rules." "I'm not in your HOA," I said plainly. She looked up slowly, as if I'd just spit on her shoes. "The Pinewood Lakes Homeowners Association covers every resident with lake access." "That might be true for the subdivision," I said. "But this parcel predates your association by about 30 years. It's unincorporated. Not in your covenant." She didn't like that. Not one bit. She handed the deed back with a sneer. "We'll see what the sheriff has to say." And just like that, she stormed off. 30 minutes later, while I was hauling in a box of books, a cruiser rolled up. The deputy, young, polite, stepped out and asked to see ID and proof of ownership. I showed him everything. He nodded and apologized. "Sorry, sir. We get calls like this a lot. Some folks don't like new neighbors." "Let me guess," I said. "Woman with a binder and a personality like a cactus?" He chuckled. "That'd be Loretta. She called again the next morning, this time claiming I was illegally tapping into her lake's utilities. The officer didn't even get out of the car. He waved, I waved, and Loretta stood 40 feet away with her arms crossed like she was auditioning for a soap opera. But that was just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, she filed 6 complaints: noise violations, for hammering at 4 p.m., unauthorized vegetation alteration, I mowed the yard, improper waste disposal, I used a rented dumpster, and, my favorite, boating without lake registration. Let me explain something about this lake. It's spring-fed, naturally occurring, and it sits right across the boundary of several properties. The HOA claims to manage it, but they don't actually own it. I double-checked with the county. Turns out, my land includes 80 feet of shoreline and about a quarter of the lake itself. And Loretta? She'd been treating the lake like it was her private club. Issuing dock permits, collecting fees, even limiting access to people she personally approved. Not legal. Not even close. So I started digging. With a little help from a retired real estate attorney I met at the hardware store, I pulled the original plats and historical ownership records. The lake wasn't an HOA asset, it was a shared natural resource, and each bordering property had riparian rights. But mine? Mine went further. My deed included explicit rights to the lake bed beneath the water, not just access to it. Which meant, I owned a section of the actual lake. And the HOA? They'd been trespassing on it for years. I kept quiet for a bit. Built my dock. Fixed up the cabin. Said hello to the few friendly neighbors who didn't wear pastel sweaters and condescension like a uniform. But Loretta kept escalating. One night, I found a warning sticker slapped on my kayak. Unauthorized vessel, remove immediately or face fines. She'd left it herself, with the HOA letterhead and all. That was the last straw. I went straight to the county clerk's office and filed a cease and desist against the Pinewood Lakes HOA for illegal enforcement of rules on non-HOA property. Then I filed a complaint with the state's Department of Real Estate, attaching all her bogus fines and warning letters. But I wasn't done. I also filed a legal notice revoking public and HOA access to the portion of the lake that crossed into my property. As the bed owner, I had the right to do it. No fishing. No boating. No swimming. No crossing into my section of the water. I put up buoys, signs, and a floating barrier line. Didn't block the lake entirely, just my legally owned quarter. But the only boat launch? It sat smack in the section I now controlled. And that boat launch had been used by the HOA for years, despite being partly on my land. Within days, HOA members were furious. Kayakers stopped short at the new "no trespassing" buoys. Fishermen grumbled. Kids couldn't swim past the line. Loretta marched down with 2 board members and demanded I remove the obstruction. I politely told her I'd be happy to, once she acknowledged in writing that my land wasn't under her jurisdiction, dropped all bogus complaints, and issued a written apology for harassment. She refused. So I let the situation stew. For weeks. The HOA held emergency meetings. People were pissed. Their private HOA lake had a red line through it, and suddenly they realized it wasn't theirs at all. By month 3, pressure boiled over. A group of HOA residents, some genuinely decent folks, asked to meet. They'd done their own research and discovered Loretta had lied to them for years, collecting lake maintenance fees that weren't legally required. Turns out she'd even used some of that money to pave her driveway and install a custom boat lift, under the guise of community infrastructure. So the residents voted her out. Unanimously. But wait, there's more. One of the neighbors, a guy named Rick, was a semi-retired civil attorney. He helped the new board audit the HOA's finances. What they found? Loretta had misused over $70,000 in discretionary funds, and the HOA was now facing a class action lawsuit from its own members. By the end of the year, the HOA had formally amended its charter, stripping itself of all authority over lake use and ending all enforcement on non-member properties. The boat launch was permanently closed unless all bordering landowners, myself included, approved it. I didn't. Instead, I installed my own private boat ramp, rented out lake access to a local fishing club, and put up a new sign. Private water, HOA members not permitted without written permission. So yeah, Loretta called the cops on me for moving into my cabin. And it cost her entire HOA access to the lake they never actually owned. Peace returned after that. The cabin's fully renovated now. My dock is the best on the lake. I fish every morning with coffee and no drama. The birds still don't care about politics. And me? I sleep just fine knowing the one woman who tried to ruin my new start accidentally gave me control of the lake instead. Funny thing about water, it always finds its level. So do people.